Hi and welcome to Restore 2023. Today we're in Hebrews 11. So here in this chapter, faith is illustrated from Old Testament examples. The author names Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Rahab, Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David and Samuel, and the prophets, who he didn't name. The author starts by explaining what biblical faith is. Faith consists of persistent hope in the promises of God, and it is such faith that obtains salvation on that last day. The word assurance, used here, can also be translated confidence. By using the words assurance and conviction, the author indicates that biblical faith is not a vague hope grounded in imaginary wishful thinking, but faith is a settled confidence that something in the future, something that is not yet seen, but has been promised by God, will actually come to pass because God will bring it about. Faith is not blind trust in the face of contrary evidence, not an unknowable leap in the dark. Rather, faith is a confident trust in the eternal God who is all-powerful, infinitely wise, eternally trustworthy. It is a conviction of things unseen. So this chapter celebrates individuals and groups who exemplify desired attitudes and virtues, trust in God's promises, and faithful endurance in the face of persecution. The author doesn't mention their quite significant failings, but wants to illustrate what faith looks like and to connect the current people of God with this cloud of witnesses. I'm not going to comment on all the heroes of faith in this chapter. That would make this video far too long. I'm just going to highlight some points that I personally find interesting. So the first is Abel. The notion that Abel still speaks derives from Genesis 4:10, where his blood cries out. But here, this speaking by faith suggests that Abel offers an example to be followed. The next is Enoch. Very little is said about Enoch. You can read about it in the few verses they are in Genesis 5:21-24. It is assumed that the phrase walked with God, because that's all pretty much it says about Enoch, meant he pleased God and therefore God took him. There's no further explanation. And the only other person in the Bible who didn't die and was taken up like this was Elijah, and there is a great deal said about him. Abraham's faith seems to perfectly illustrate the description of faith that believes in the unseen promise of the future. In verse 8, the author describes that Abraham went out not knowing where he was going. And Sarah is an interesting one. Genesis 21, verses 1-7, Sarah laughed in apparent unbelief when she was told that she was going to have a son. However, the author is happy to include her as a role for an example of faith, despite her feelings, and believes she did have true faith and that her laughter of unbelief at first turned into laughter of joy at the birth of Isaac. Most of those mentioned in this chapter saw only preliminary glimpses of what was specifically promised, and all were anticipating a greater future hope. Verse 16. In light of something better for us in verse 40, refers to the new covenant realities of the superior Son of God, with his superior priesthood and the consequent eternal perfection of the faithful. The perfection of the believers is the goal, accomplished through the work of the perfect Son of God. The Old Testament saints, along with those of this era, will partake together of the same end times perfection, sinless selves in deathless resurrection bodies. The God who has revealed himself in his word and in the person of Christ, whose promises have proven true from generation to generation, and who will never leave or forsake his own. In chapter 13:5. Such faith in the unseen realities of God is emphasised throughout this chapter and has provided confidence and assurance to all who receive Christ as their Lord and Saviour.